Yeah, I did enjoy playing the game because it taught me more. I knew about what was happening to some women, but it just taught me more about how they could feel and the impact of the abuse.
It's like a good experience, you know, like how someone's feeling in their kind of view, and you get to make your own choices for if the bully should be punished or not. So yeah,
it was very interesting because it showed the conflicts between people around a similar age to me, which is fairly similar to what it's like in my school.
I think it's definitely good to see from like that perspective, because you do know these stuff is happening and you can like imagine it, but you feel more like in their shoes because you're seeing from their sort of side of their story. So I think the game was like very good in like that regard. Even though the boyfriend wasn't like the best character, you still kind of see what was going on in that side of the story.
They all had the ups and downs, the characters, because some of them were a bit blunt with what they said, not choosing the best options, just trying to avoid it all, which can't be a good idea because it can come back later and basically get you again if you can choose to ignore it. Whereas some of them decided to face it head on, which seemed like the best option for me.
I think the thing I remember the most is actually when we first met James, the boyfriend, because his first introduction, I'm pretty sure he like dragged us out of a cafe where we were just sitting there, and I felt like you kind of instantly got an idea of what he was like from that. And I felt like, and then I was kind of confused the rest of the game why she still stayed with him if that was his first introduction, that he was, you know, dragging her out of the cafe.
where they're making a decision if she should like sleep with James or not, because it's like the ending, and it's like I think it's the most important thing for her and like the best part of the game, because you get to like say that you're saying no instead of saying that she should do it, she shouldn't do it. It's up to her if she wanted to do it.
There's quite a lot, like, I think more like emotional stuff with things like that, where she was texting one of her friends and he said that she couldn't text one of her friends because he was a boy and that would be cheating.
I think it's taught me that it's not always physical and it can be emotional as well, and the way that James controlled the way she dressed, how much makeup she wore, and really like put her down for the way that she was, and just controlled who she was. And I didn't really know that could happen as well, so I learnt that.
Every human has the flaws, but I see as I'm where I need to be right now, and I've not come across them situations yet, so I don't need to use it.
It sort of shows how quickly things can escalate if they're left untouched, and if people don't know about it, and how much it can affect people.
I think that there's a lot more to it than just breaking up with your abuser, because Daniela was emotionally attached to him, and he kind of used that to manipulate and abuse her.
I think that more like year 8, year 9 is kind of a good age, because I think that that's when you really start, you know, you meet more people. And I think before then people kind of are not necessarily immature, but they're not likely to get into those sort of relationships because you're in more of a new scenario when you're in year 7. But when you're getting more comfortable, I think that like year 8, year 9 is kind of when you might start building a relationship that could get toxic, like in the game.
But I think that as much as like year 7s, they won't be really thinking about those kind of relationships yet. I feel like if we try and target at people who are already thinking about relationships, it might be better to do it before then, so that they know that when they're sort of trying to work out a relationship, they know what the healthy relationship should look like before they even get to that stage, to know kind of what to expect and what isn't right in a relationship before they're even thinking about actually being in one.
I think that primary school year 6 is too young because they're still, well, they don't really know these things, but I think year 7 and year 8, it would be good to start then, because also people's parents, it might be very like not severe at all, and it could just be very little, but they could notice something and just think that it's nothing. But if they're taught that it could escalate, then they could find help and support their family.
Yeah, I think every person should learn about abuse because it can happen to anyone. So I think they should definitely put it in all schools and the curriculum.
Yeah, because then they can teach like a handful of kids how to make good choices instead of following other people's opinions.
It can make people feel more kind of comfortable about the topic, because there might be people who, you know, they don't really want to say anything because, you know, they might be scared. And if there's other people talking about it more casually, like it's not a casual subject, but they can feel, you know, more safe saying what they think about the kind of abuse that's happening. Because I think that one major problem would be someone could play the game, realise they're experiencing it, but then be too scared to say anything.
You don't really see stuff like that in lesson, but it's more or less outside of lessons and outside of school. You're seeing it with your own two eyes, what it would be like, whereas when you're getting taught it, it's being verbally spoken to you.
When you're just reading a scenario, it doesn't really feel that real. Like, it's kind of just, you know, you kind of know, if you're reading it, it seems very like black and white. You know whether that's like, because you're like, oh, well, we've learned that that's illegal, so that one's wrong. But in real life, it's a lot harder to tell because they're not always quite so extreme. Like, sometimes you have relationships where they're really nice and then sometimes they're horrible to you and then they're nice again.
In the game, you can see how it builds up and you can understand how it's got to that position, and you can work out how you can stop it getting as far as it is in RE, like the scenarios given there. So they would complement each other well in that sense, I think.
You're always given from the viewpoint of the victim and not of the abuser. So if you saw what the abuser also did, it would make you have more sympathy for the victim.
I think that it would be good to have other games about other topics, because I think that although you do learn new stuff with this game about relationships, I think relationships can, well, some of the things that happen can be more of the simpler side, whereas there's some problems that happen that are quite a lot more complicated that it's kind of hard to understand, which could be good to put in a game format for you kind of to understand how that might happen and how to deal with it.
When they're doing anti-bullying and like they're doing like one person could be the bully, one person could be getting bullied, and then there could be loads of people involved in it. So they could change the game up a bit to make it as like an anti-bullying one or something.
I think a game that kind of like develops on the relationship with the friend Emily, who was not necessarily the best friend ever, like dealing with like toxic friendship.
I think that stuff about maybe, like it could be for an older audience, but stuff more about like addiction, so stuff like drugs and alcohol, because I don't really know anything like about it, because it's not really talked about, but I know that there is people that kind of get involved in that sort of stuff.
We're not really taught about like what happens like behind the scenes with like addiction and like violence and stuff. Like, we are given RE lessons about violence and stuff, but we're never like given lessons about what could happen to ourselves if we have addictions and stuff. We're just told not to do it instead of how to get out of it.
Sometimes it can be when you're in a group with a class and your teacher, they might not explain it how it's shown in the game. So you might understand it a bit more in like a game form than in like the teacher just telling you.